I'm hoping the Big Ten has to modify their system for us.
Probably like getting grade 10 sandpaper rubbed on your face every day.
I mean, we say it all the time, whether, there's two types of turds, you're a sinker or you're a floater, but you're still a turd, right? I
mean, we are about players and players playing the plays and not necessarily the plays.
Welcome to the Varsity Club podcast. My name is Derek Peterson. We have a big one this weekend. Or maybe not. The opponent Nebraska's playing doesn't appear to have a name or a face, which is strange. Joining me this week to talk about the game, I have two men now, one later. All are excellent. I'm very excited to have them on. First, Hail Varsity's managing editor and old school newspaper hat aficionado, Brandon Vogel. Brandon, hello. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Second, an absolute icon in the Nebraska media sphere. It would be dereliction of duty to not have him on this specific podcast for this specific week. It's the one and only Mike Babcock. Mike, my good friend, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Icon translates to old, I think, and that's where I qualify. Old, ancient.
Well, how about The Godfather? That's what I put on Twitter. We'll go with The Godfather.
Yeah, there you go. That's good. They called Bob Devaney the Bob Father at one point. So
The Godfather would imply that you have just like an iron fist that you're ruling everything with, which would be the exact opposite way to describe you. So
yeah, that probably wouldn't work.
Real quick, some housekeeping points. Subscribe to Hail Varsity. A new magazine is coming. You will want to read it. Go to hailvarsity.com/subscribe. Also, Brandon has a podcast. Subscribe to that if you don't already. It's the I-80 Preview Podcast, and it's perfect for the drive to a game on a normal week. This week, I imagine there is some additional drive time. I've made this drive probably 5 or 6 times a year over the last 4 or 5 years. And that particular drive from Nebraska to Oklahoma is perfect for podcasts because you really need to zone out. There's not much around you. While you're at it, check out the full catalog of podcast offerings. This is a proud part of the Hail Varsity Network. Shouts to Cam for producing this podcast every week. He's our producer. Also, go sign up to be a mentor with teammates. They're not paying me to say that. I just love that organization. Think everyone should be a part of it. In a little bit, I'll be joined by Kegan Renaud. He's an old buddy of mine from school. He's got an OU-focused podcast and a Patreon account with writing and film breakdowns that you can subscribe to. He's a great guy. He'll offer up some OU insight later in the podcast. But first, my two guests here right now, gentlemen, it's Oklahoma week. One of Scott Frost's sloganeering bits from his early days was nameless, faceless opponent, and you'd hear it crop up before big games, rivalry games, like games with Iowa specifically. I understand it from a coaching perspective, but sometimes I just wish people in this sport would be like, yeah, you know what? We played Buffalo last week. They were all right. We played the number 3 team in the country this week, Oklahoma. We've got history with them. This one means a lot. Something I found interesting, though, and this is kind of what we're going to talk about. Savion Morrison is a second-year freshman running back for Nebraska. He was born in 2002. He's from Oklahoma. Since the time of his birth, Nebraska football has a record of 143-100. That's a 59 winning percentage. It has 4 double-digit win seasons. It has 0 AP top 10 finishes. It has fired 4 different head coaches, and it has won 0 conference championships. Since the time of Savion's birth, Oklahoma football has a record of 206-49. That's an 81 winning percentage. It has had 15 double-digit win seasons. It has had 13 AP top 10 finishes. It has not fired a head coach, and it has 13 conference championships. So it was pretty apparent in the Monday press conference this week that the Nebraska-Oklahoma rivalry has more of an emotional grip on the fan base than it does the players. Brandon, we'll start with you. Do you think that will sort of detract from the game atmosphere or take away from the game in any way? Or is this going to, even though the teams aren't on the same level that maybe Osborne and Joe Castiglione thought they would be at when they set this game up a few years ago, do you think this game is going to have something of a muted atmosphere given all the pageantry around it? Or do you think it's going to still be a big deal?
I think it has a chance to still be a pretty big deal. I mean, from the players' perspective, it's probably a little different than facing Alabama if they were to do that, or facing Ohio State, which was another Big Ten program. When Nebraska joined the Big Ten, they had, some series like against a Minnesota that were pretty lengthy. Ohio State wasn't one of those. So I think from the players' perspective, it becomes just, this is a really good team. And for us to kind of make a public show of progress that we're making, we need to be in one of these games, one of those times. But I think it'll still feel big in stadium. It obviously has meaning for fans of a certain age, even though that becomes a dwindling group as we continue to go on. So I don't think it detracts from it. It's just different for the players. And I thought they did a good job of explaining exactly why this week.
Yeah. Samori Touré's comment where he said, what kind of team would we be if we didn't think we were up to the challenge or we didn't think we could do it? I thought was interesting. I mean, I think the point spread was 23 or 24 when the line opened. So very few people expect Nebraska to actually be competitive, but I think, specifically with the way that they've shown defensively, we could get a good game as long as they don't, do some of the offensive shooting yourself in the foot that they've done recently.
Yeah, on that point, that's really kind of what I need to see from Nebraska. Not to get into a deep game breakdown, but Touré's comment was right on the nose. What kind of team would we be if that weren't the case? And we see this happen in college football a lot. And I think minus 2018 at Ohio State, I'm still waiting for Nebraska to show that again, where, you see Tulane go in week one and they're not scared at all. Like, they're like, we belong here. And you see that across college football. I mean, Iowa State and Kansas State, I think, are further along in Nebraska in some regards culturally, but the talent level isn't drastically different. So I want to see a Nebraska team that's willing to go in there and trade punches and feel like they deserve to be there.
Sure. You mentioned, Brandon, before there's like a dwindling class of people that this game means something personal to. This game means something to me just because, this is the team that my dad grew up a fan of. And then on the other side is where I went to school. But for like my age group, it doesn't have the same kind of historical punch, I guess, as for some of the older generations. Mike, I'm going to transition to you. I'm not calling you old, but I am going to ask you, why does this game mean so much to people?
Well, I think there's a long tradition for Nebraska, Oklahoma, again, for people of a certain age. The one thing that I would say, and this may be obvious, but this rivalry has always meant a little bit more to Nebraska than it has to Oklahoma, because for Oklahoma, it's always been Texas. And you saw that when the Big 12 was established. And Oklahoma didn't have a problem going into the opposite division and not playing Nebraska every year. Nebraska fans had that was a concern. It's like we need to play Oklahoma every year because that's what, that's our rival. But so it's always meant a little bit more to Nebraska fans, I think. But, there are elements of it that go back a long way. And I'm just going to tell kind of a funny story, I think. And this really doesn't have anything to do with current times because we're talking 100 years ago. But when Nebraska was in the Missouri Valley Conference, the Missouri Valley Conference had a rule that you had to play your home games in your hometown city. So Lincoln, Nebraska's home games were to be played in Lincoln. In 1919, Nebraska scheduled a game, a non-conference game against Oklahoma in Omaha as part of a doubleheader. Creighton, I think, played Marquette, something. Nebraska barely made expenses by doing that, so it was a mistake. But when Nebraska scheduled that game, it was evicted from the Missouri Valley Conference because it violated one of the rules. So in 1920, Nebraska played, I think, one Missouri Valley team. Everybody else dumped them. I think maybe Kansas didn't. But Nebraska was out of the conference for 2 years. The team that replaced Nebraska in the Missouri Valley Conference was Oklahoma. So Nebraska gets tossed out. Oklahoma gets brought in. 1921, Nebraska asks, hey, can we get back in the conference? We're sorry. Nebraska's allowed back in. So now Oklahoma and Nebraska are conference rivals. The Big Six, Missouri Valley has cut down to the Big Six, and Nebraska and Oklahoma have been rivals all the way to every year until the Big 12 is formed and they play on every 4 years or there's a break in there. So the Nebraska-Oklahoma thing goes back a long way. It goes back 100 years. For Nebraska fans, you just looking at history, it's an ironic kind of a thing how they end up in the same conference. Okay, then, another sort of, and this isn't all there is to it, but, Oklahoma had the 47-game winning streak, and then it had the 74-game conference unbeaten streak. There were 2 ties in there, but Nebraska upset them in 1959. That was a big deal to Nebraska fans, obviously, and there was a dynamic going on there too, because Bill Jennings, Nebraska's coach, had been an assistant at Oklahoma and had actually kind of been the recruiting coordinator. Oklahoma was investigated by the NCAA for recruiting violations. Bill Jennings took the fall for it. I believe they got him a job in Dallas for an oil company or something. He was dismissed from the Oklahoma staff. He took the fall. Nebraska hires him as head coach. So now you've got a little bit of unhappiness on the part of Bill Jennings because he got dumped by Oklahoma. He's the coach at Nebraska in 1959 when they upset Oklahoma. There are some other recruiting things that go on in there. Bill Jennings always claimed that he and Bud Wilkinson had an agreement that he wouldn't look at any players in Oklahoma to recruit unless Wilkinson signed off on it. Wilkinson said he wouldn't look at any players in Nebraska unless Jennings signed off on it. This is what Jennings said. So Monty Kiffin is a senior at Lexington High School. Bud Wilkinson takes a flight to Lexington to talk to Monty Kiffin without getting clearance from Bill Jennings. So there's tension there. Oklahoma goes on probation for recruiting violations, blames Bill Jennings for the guy at Nebraska now for turning him in. They try to get Nebraska on some recruiting thing of a player from Wichita, Kansas. I think nothing ever came of it. So 1959, you have the big upset. 1960, Nebraska goes down there and wins again, and Jennings has to be escorted off the field with police because the Oklahoma fans are so upset with him. Okay, so it's not a big deal because Nebraska doesn't beat Oklahoma on a consistent basis, but Nebraska beat them 2 years in a row. Then Bob Devaney comes here. First year, goes down to Norman, gets beat 34-6. I don't know, whatever it was. The next year, 63, is right after the Kennedy assassination, and there's a question about whether the game should be played or not. And I think television stepped in and said it needs to be played, or I think the conference stepped in actually and said, you need to play the game. We need to identify a conference champion because we have an agreement with the Orange Bowl or whatever. Anyway, it's one of the few games that's played on that Saturday after the Kennedy assassination. Oklahoma, Nebraska wins the game. Devaney didn't have a great success against Oklahoma. Here's one more sort of little story, but in 1968, Nebraska finished 6-4. The last game of the season is Oklahoma. Nebraska gets beat 47-0. Bob's pretty upset about it because the coach at Oklahoma, Chuck Fairbanks, played at Michigan State when Bob was an assistant coach there. And I believe Bob was his position coach. So there's a little tension there. 1969, Nebraska plays Oklahoma, beats them 44-14. I think it's the only game that Steve Owens didn't rush for 100 yards. So there's a little bit of tension there. Devaney and Chuck Fairbanks, and then you've got the game of the century, and then you've got the situation with Tom Osborne, has a difficult time winning against Barry Switzer coach teams. The first time Tom does it, 1978, big upset. Oklahoma's number 1 in his book, Bootlegger's Boy. I think Barry Switzer said that might have been the best team he had. Nebraska beats them. Week later, Nebraska loses to Missouri. Warren Powers. There's another some more tension there. So Nebraska doesn't have an opportunity to play Penn State in the Orange Bowl. It plays a rematch with Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl, gets beat. Then I think Nebraska loses the next 3 years. And when Turgeon comes here, Nebraska wins three in a row. But Tom Osborne had difficulty beating Barry Switzer. So Nebraska fans, it was traditionally, and if you look at it, it was mostly the last game of the regular season. A couple times in 71, it wasn't even the last game because they went to Hawaii, Nebraska did, and played a game out there. Sometimes people forget that. It was played around Thanksgiving. It wasn't always played on Thanksgiving, but people, get it in your mind. You remember it that way. So it was there were just a lot of things that went there. For a time there, it was like whoever won the Nebraska-Oklahoma game probably won the conference. I mean, it had that kind of implication. And then Oklahoma went on a little bit of a downslide. Nebraska won 3 national championships under Osborne. And really, I look at the kind of last hurrah for Nebraska was the game in 2001 that Nebraska upset Oklahoma 20-10, and then later on got hammered by Colorado, and it that fell off the cliff after that. Haven't been consistently in the national rankings since then.
That 2001 game, that was my first college football game. So there's the significance for me. That was the first one I got to attend. My dad took me to that game. I remember walking through downtown and thinking, like, this place is huge. These buildings are gigantic, because I was little. And then the first time I came back to Lincoln, I was like, this is nothing like I remember it from when I was here the last time.
Yeah, it was, there was great enthusiasm, there's a big upset, Oklahoma, whatever, and then the Colorado debacle. And things have never been the same.
There are a couple of things that just stuck out of my head as you were talking through that. First of all, the parallel between Nebraska 100 years ago wanting to play a game outside of the structure of the conference and getting kicked out of the conference. Contrast that to what happened last year. I think it's funny. Also, can you imagine if opposing coaches had to request permission from Nick Saban to recruit inside the state of Alabama? That'd be incredible.
Yeah, I don't know if that's an apocryphal story or not. Bill Jennings told me that at one point, but he was a good assistant coach at Oklahoma. I mean, they really respected him, but when the investigation came, they dumped him and got him a decent job with an oil company, I think, but he wanted to coach.
So, Brandon, Mike references the 2001 game, and immediately my head goes to a personal memory that I have associated with that game. It seems like, from what I've seen from people on social media and heard, most people have a personal memory associated with Nebraska-Oklahoma. Do you have one? What's your favorite memory of this game?
Yeah. So when we were starting Hail Varsity, literally the first issue we did was the 50 years of sellouts. And I had no idea what I was doing. I was just lucky to be there. And Mike asked me to write a column for that issue about, I think it was first Nebraska game. And my first Nebraska game was actually 1987, Oklahoma, Nebraska, kind of coined as game of the century too. The buildup for that game was huge. Armin Katayan, longtime journalist, and I can't remember the co-author, but came in and wrote this muckraking book about the whole thing. And it's an interesting read. I don't use muckraking as a negative necessarily. It was what it was. So that was my first Nebraska game, and I would have been 8 then. My brother was 4, and he went. And I specifically remember he got really, really sick to the point where he didn't get to go. But that was a rarity. That was the only Nebraska game I went to, because I grew up 6 hours from Lincoln, and just buzzing down there for a Saturday wasn't really a reality for us. So that was the first and only Nebraska game I went to until I was in college. And I remember it was pretty cold. We were up underneath the overhang, I think in West Stadium. There was a pillar right in my way. But it was more kind of, I think, what you experienced in 2001. of you're just like, oh, so this is what it's all about. This is what, everybody's watching on TV all the time. And we stayed at the Cornhusker Hotel. My brother and I got t-shirts. I think my mom found my brother's t-shirt. Mine is lost. But I still have my brother's t-shirt from that, and did the whole bit, stayed right in downtown Lincoln, went to the game. My parents, hopefully they don't get mad at me for mentioning this, but I've mentioned it before, so they should be used to it. Got some bootleg shirts off the street corner that read expletive Oklahoma. I still have that as well. So, it just growing up,
Excellent.
It was like, it was the game that mattered. I think for the reasons that Mike explained, it was often the last game of the season. And then it was also like the stakes were there too. I was actually reading Oklahoma's game notes this morning, and there was one thing that gave me pause. They had a listing, a little sidebar about most conference championships in college football. Oklahoma is number one, and I don't remember the number. And I think this was all time. And Nebraska is still number two, which surprised me given that they haven't won one since 1999. And I mean, I think that right there tells you why this rivalry, I'll still call it that because it is one to me, even if they don't get to play it very often, why this rivalry stands out. And you look at 1-2 in terms of conference championships, like the stakes for that are going to be really, really high over a really long period of time. And then you get into some of the more detailed stuff, the handshake deals, the connections between the programs. And it was a ton of fun. Next, I was at that 2001 Oklahoma game as well. So I think we're 3 for 3 for being at that game in person on the podcast. I was there in 2009 when Nebraska's defense carried the day, and it was really its only way to win that game. And then 2010. So I've been to 4 Nebraska-Oklahoma games in person. I've never covered one though. So I'm excited to get the chance to do that. I
remember watching the 2010 game at my my aunt and uncle's house in Kansas. And like everybody is just screaming at the TV as that game unfolds because they were all, of course, Nebraska people. My grandfather went to K-State, so he grew up a K-State fan, but he also lived in Nebraska, so he was Nebraska. That game was wild. Mike, you're just a wealth of historical information on Nebraska, but do you have a personal memory associated with this game for you?
I think that. Now, I didn't go to a lot of games growing up. I just didn't have the opportunity. I think the first Nebraska-Oklahoma game I saw was the game in 1970 here because I was in graduate school then. I had a student ticket. But the most memorable Nebraska-Oklahoma game for me will always be the 1978 game for a couple of reasons. One, it was the first year I was at the Lincoln Journal and Star newspaper. Being a newspaper person was what I always wanted to do, but I taught for 7 years in a community college. My master's degree was in English. I didn't really know how you prepared for being a sports writer. So by accident, kind of, I got that job. But Nebraska was number 4, I think. Oklahoma was number 1. Again, my first game actually covering Nebraska-Oklahoma. It was a dramatic finish. Oklahoma fumbled 9 times, lost 6 of those fumbles, including one right within 2 or 3 yards of the goal line with late in the game. Billy Sims fumbled it away. The other thing is that because I grew up with the rivalry, even though I didn't go to a lot of games, I watched the games on TV whenever it was available. And so all the time that I've done this, and I don't travel anymore, but my favorite place to go, and not counting bowl games, my favorite place to go was Norman, Oklahoma. Again, because of that background. I think the 2 best stadiums for me always were the one in Norman and Notre Dame. I went there and that was unbelievable. I didn't grow up a Notre Dame fan, but that experience was really remarkable as well. But Oklahoma was always here's the interesting thing. For a newspaper person going to Oklahoma, the Oklahoma people, the administration, the coaches, the sports information people, they were always so accommodating. Typically the newspaper, when the game was in Norman, we'd send somebody down, 2 or 3 days before the game to write advances. And I went down a couple of times on that. And they were just accommodating, If you want to talk to players, go ahead and talk to players. You had access to the locker room. It was quite different from the way Nebraska handled things. And I always joke, I was on a first name basis with Barry Switzer. Not my name. He called me Bob, but he would all, it was always a cordial thing like that. And so the Nebraska-Oklahoma thing, and, for me, the games are kind of secondary. It's always been the people, coaches, players, administration, support personnel, fans, the people that I work with. That's what keeps me doing what I do. And that's why Oklahoma was special for me. And in the Big Eight, you got to know everybody. You had the Skyriders tour as a 10-day deal. You made stops. You knew all the SIDs, all the coaches, all the athletic directors. It was a first name basis, but no place was more accommodating than Oklahoma. And that 78 game was my first opportunity as a journalist to see it. And, that's pretty cool too, because I hadn't seen that many games at that point.
Yeah. And we didn't get access to the lot, but when I was kind of going through school, they were really accommodating. I've told people that was one of the best places to learn how to do this job in school, just because of how great they were. Now Gaylord's going to look a little bit different from what you guys remember it. It's a little different. Also, Brandon, because you're going to be there, the Mont does swirls to go now. Oklahoma's new law went into effect where they can sell alcohol to go. So you're going to have to get a swirl and take it with you because it's wonderful. So put that on the checklist. I have been to, I covered 2 Colorado games, and there was a lot of hatred kind of on display for those 2 games. That seems to be what the entire series was, the entire rivalry was. My interaction with people from Oklahoma when they find out that I covered Nebraska was the exact opposite. And when I first moved here, when people found out that I was from Oklahoma and that I had gone to OU and had covered the Sooners for a little bit, the reaction was always like, oh, I missed those guys. What's the team like? There was a lot of respect. And so kind of for the first few years I was here, when people would ask me, like when people back home would ask me, how's Nebraska doing? Do they miss this game? I'd be like, yeah, there's just a healthy respect for the 2 teams. And I've seen in recent days on social media, some people have said that that's like a hijacking of the narrative, that this rivalry, this series used to be just white hot hatred and not so much respect. I guess, Brandon, we'll start with you. Like, was this series respectful, or was there just was it like Colorado hatred?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So, like as I mentioned, my insertion into the Nebraska-Oklahoma rivalry is kind of like 87. That's where it starts. I'm probably aware of it a little bit earlier. And at that point, I mentioned the shirt my parents bought, as mostly a joke, but that like sentiment was there. And I think, Sooner Magic, that whole piece of it, and just Barry Switzer, his nature. And I do think there was a good deal of respect for Barry Switzer as well. But he liked to, rib people, and he liked to take it. I don't know if shots is the right word, but, he'd rib you a little bit. So I think there was kind of, from Nebraska's perspective, Oklahoma was the team that had to beat, which was largely true for Oklahoma too. But for longer stretches, Oklahoma was the team Nebraska couldn't beat. So I think the hatred probably, if we're going to use that word, stemmed from that. But I've always looked at this rivalry as it's not classic in the sense of, the hatred between Oklahoma and Texas's football programs predate college football to a certain degree. I mean, they're just, and you get this with these sort of backyard rivalries, and Nebraska-Oklahoma was never that. I've written before that, unlike some of these, a Nebraska never got their gas pumped by an Oklahoman or vice versa. So you just don't have that constant interaction, which I think makes, something like West Virginia Pitt or Clemson, South Carolina, a little bit more tense. So I've always felt a good deal of respect both ways. And I think that's my best theory as to why.
You are correct in saying in your assessment that Oklahomans and Texans hate each other, and it has nothing to do with football because we were born and raised to not like Texas. So right on the money. Mike, do you have the same sort of take as Brandon? Do you agree with Brandon on this?
Yeah, I want to Texas, Oklahoma. I have a little footnote on that. Skyriders tour. The year.
Hold on one sec. Is this glowing for Texas or is this negative towards Texas?
This is negative towards Texas.
I'll allow it. Continue.
Bosworth is from Texas, right?
Yeah.
But he goes to Oklahoma. And we interview him on the Skyriders tour. He comes in, he's got a button-down shirt. I mean, he didn't look like the boss. He was just Bosworth. And he said, somebody asked him about it. You're from Texas, but you come to Oklahoma. And he said, I hate Texas. I hate orange. And that's as simple as that. And that's all he'd say. There was that hatred. That wasn't the case with Nebraska. And a couple things. One, Switzer and Bob Devaney were pretty good friends. And in 1980, I think when they played, Bob Devaney had a Friday night prediction show on Channel 10, I think, 10, 11. And so Barry Switzer worked it out. And while Bob was sitting there, Barry Switzer came out and gave him a taco, an indication that they were going to lose the game and they were going to go to the Sun Bowl. And Oklahoma was going to go to the Orange Bowl, which is what happened. But it was kind of a funny thing that Switzer did. And I don't know if a lot of people know, but I think Switzer and Osborne maintained a fairly regular conversation on the phone. I mean, it wasn't like they just liked each other or anything like that. So I think that within the coaching staff, that there wasn't that sort of tension. For the fans, I think if there was tension, it was mostly the result of frustration, because Oklahoma, again, under Switzer, Nebraska didn't have much success. And he became the head coach the same year that Tom became head coach in 1973. So that was frustrating for Husker fans to lose to Oklahoma. And, there was always the talk that Tom was going to lose his job because he couldn't beat Oklahoma. His teams couldn't beat Oklahoma. And in 78, when Nebraska finally did, was the same time that Tom went out to Colorado and interviewed for the job out there to replace Bill Mallory and got pretty close to taking on. I don't know really how close it was, but I know that he and Nancy flew out there and he talked to the players and then indicated to us that he, in talking to the players, he realized that he couldn't coach those players against players that he had coached at Nebraska. So he declined the job. But I think Colorado offered him $100,000 salary, and he was making about $35,000 at Nebraska at the time. So that was a big thing. But it was you couldn't separate it from Oklahoma not being successful against Oklahoma. So if the fan frustration had to be that, but it wasn't. I don't think it was to the degree that when Warren Powers brought Missouri in here, the fans were not too cordial. And I think when Bill McCartney was the coach at Colorado, the fans were not too cordial because they were responding to what it was like out there in Boulder. That was always, we always drove out to Boulder and we always rented a car. We didn't want one with Nebraska plates on it, driving out to Boulder because you were asking for trouble if that were the case.
Yeah, I remember when we went to Boulder, people told us this. You might have told us that exact thing. Because I think Aaron made a point of getting a car that didn't have Nebraska plates on it because we didn't want to deal with that.
No, you didn't want Nebraska plates in Colorado. You didn't want to really be associated with Nebraska and Colorado because they'd throw stuff at you.
Yeah.
Although Nebraska fans threw oranges on the field too, and that was not a good thing when the police officer got hit with one and suffered severe injuries. But yeah, it was a different time, that's for sure.
Different kind of rivalry, different kind of series for this game. So this game is technically commemorating the 50th anniversary of the 1971 game of the century. Number 1 Nebraska beat number 2 Oklahoma 35-31. That game features one of the signature moments in all of college football history, Johnny Rodgers' punt return. This game is in name sort of the anniversary of that game. That game took place on November 25th, 1971. This game is taking place almost a month and a half earlier, 2 months earlier. So to me, this game feels a little bit more like a commemoration of the entire series, the rivalry, the, I guess, connection between these two programs. It's interesting that, Brandon brings up Oklahoma's number 1 in conference championships, Nebraska's number 2. These are 2 college football blue bloods, and they're in places where traditionally you just wouldn't expect to get this kind of a dominant football program. Now Oklahoma's got Texas, but I think before recruiting boomed and Oklahoma recently has been able to go wherever they want to recruit, but that hasn't always been the case. And yet these 2 programs are huge and they're connected, I think, partly because of that, just because they had success where maybe they shouldn't have had success, or it was more difficult to have success. So to me, like, this weekend feels like it's going to be sort of a commemoration of all of that, not necessarily just the one specific game 50 years ago, but all of it, all of the pageantry. And so that's a big billing. That's a lot to live up to. Brandon, I'll go back to you for this question. Do you think this can, I guess, scratch that itch? Do you think this can be that kind of a game? Do you think it can be competitive for long enough, close down the stretch? It's going to be Fox's big noon kickoff game. It's a highlight game on the calendar, regardless of where Nebraska's at. Do you think that it can be that once the ball gets kicked off?
I think there's a chance. I think Nebraska defensively, and I was pretty optimistic about defense coming in, maybe not as much as some others, but they've been better than even I thought. And Oklahoma's a totally different animal. Like, it's not going to be easy in any way. The biggest thing is, and this may seem like kind of a doomed mission, but can Nebraska's offense keep up? You've got to score points to beat Oklahoma, and that's the biggest question for me. But I do think Nebraska can come in and trade punches for a bit. Like I said a little bit earlier, it's kind of the thing I feel like I need to see from this team at some point, here in year 4 under this coaching staff. But I like it. The spread is what it is for a reason. Oklahoma's a deserving favorite. It's a program that's been way ahead of Nebraska for quite a while now. But hopefully just the opportunity, even if the players don't remember this specifically, don't have specific memories tied to it, Frost said they're going to have former players and players that were involved come in and tell them about it. You hope to see a little extra charge, I think, at Nebraska at the start. And if they get a decent start, I think they got a chance to hang in for a little bit.
Mike, what say you? Do you think this game can be close? And if not, will that sort of sour your experience of the game? Do you think that'll sour the pageantry?
Before the season, I thought, 20 plus point disparity was probably pretty accurate. But, as I watch it, and a little bit like what Brandon said with the defense, I think Nebraska, it's tough to get the mindset that you're going to go in when you're that much of an underdog. When you go into a game, it's tough to have the mindset that, hey, we're going to hang with these guys. I mean, you can tell reporters that, where, it's just a nameless, faceless opponent, and but you're aware of it, and everybody's asking them about the rivalry, and they don't know. You have to be of a certain age to understand that, certainly. But so you're bombarded with this stuff, and it's difficult to get the mindset, I think, But if you can actually believe, and I think Nebraska has some players that are pretty good, and I think the defense has a potential to be pretty good. If the offense can not make critical mistakes, and you're going to make mistakes, but if you can cut those down, I think Nebraska can be competitive in the game. The closer it gets, the more I think that's the case. But I don't know the answer to that mindset thing, to these, can the players believe, because they've had, the frustration of the Illinois loss and where Illinois is now. And it's just a mental thing, I think. If Nebraska can get that right in some way, shape, or form, I think Nebraska has a chance to hang with Oklahoma. But, I hope so, because, because of the buildup. I know that Oklahoma is hosting a big function for players from the game of the century. There are several Nebraska guys going down to that. So it could be electric atmosphere there. I don't know whether Oklahoma just looks at it as, well, there's another win on the junket, which is a mindset too the other way. So I think it comes down to mindset to some extent if Nebraska can be competitive.
Certainly. And that hits at the heart of what Frost talks about, or has been talking about for the last 3+ years, when he talks about, we need momentum, we need to start right, we need to have the right culture, we need guys to have confidence. It's just a belief that you're going to go out on the field and you're going to have just as much of a chance to win as the guys across from you. Gentlemen, I've taken up enough of your time already. I'm sure you guys have stuff to do. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast and sharing some Oklahoma memories. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Derek and Brandon.
Switching gears, I want to introduce Kegan Reneau. Keegan had me on his podcast in the summertime to talk about Nebraska, so it's only right that I return the favor and bring him on this podcast to talk about Oklahoma. Keegan's got his own podcast, Inside OU, and a Patreon with writing and film breakdowns that you can subscribe to. Keegan, I asked George Stoya to be on this podcast before I asked you, and he said no. So thank you for being number 2. Welcome.
Yeah, George definitely. That would have been interesting.
He told me he was drunk for the Tulane game, so he couldn't talk about it.
Yeah, and he's so in the weeds with the NFL right now too. He's doing an unbelievable job up with Denver. I don't know if you read his gamer from last weekend, but
he's doing great.
Good friend of mine, good friend of ours. Really close with George and gotten really close, even with me leaving the Daily like I did. Him and I have always been on good terms, and it's definitely, no, I'm excited, man. It's like the first, I guess, that I was at the Tulane game, and we can talk about the atmosphere and all that, but this is like the first real like game for Oklahoma, because obviously they played Western Carolina this last weekend.
Yeah. So I'm just ribbing you. You were my guy. You were my guy when I was like, all right, we need to have somebody on to talk about Oklahoma. I teased this on Twitter on Thursday. You were one of the football smart people that I pay attention to and listen to and trust. So let's talk about Tulane. Oklahoma led that game 37-14 at halftime. It was 40-22 entering the fourth quarter. Oklahoma survived. Tulane had 2 late scores. They had an onside kick that they recovered. Oklahoma survived 40-35. If you look at what Spencer Rattler did in that game, if you just look at the box score, and this is where I want to start with you, Spencer Rattler. He was 30 for 39 for 304 yards. He had 2 scores, one of them on the ground, and he had 2 interceptions. Fast forward to week 2 against Western Carolina. I know the opponent sucks, but he was again super efficient, throwing the ball 20 for 26. So how do you assess his first game against Tulane? He's a Heisman hopeful. He was a guy that people talked about as like, well, he'll be the top quarterback selected when he goes to the NFL draft. Preseason darling kind of guy. Did he have a good debut? Did he have an okay debut? Did he have a discouraging debut? Where are you at with him after the Tulane game?
I think like the biggest thing is that he had 4 inaccurate throws, which 2 of them kind of have answers for why they happened. So he had 2 just inexcusable inaccurate throws, and from Spencer, that's not normal. That was, as at this point, it's kind of an outlier. We'll see if it shows up more this year. A lot of people point last week at two throws he had that were bad. One was a tip pass, and the other one, the left tackle stepped on his foot. So through 2 weeks, he's had that first week had some inaccuracy stuff, which again, he was the most accurate quarterback in college football a year ago, especially on the run. And then you point to a lot of the mental stuff, which is, I think that's what a lot of people want to get to. He had, again, 4 bad decisions upstairs. 2 of them there's answers for, and it's Lincoln's at fault for it as well in terms of some of the play calling against the defense that Tulane was running. So he had 2 inaccurate throws that were inexcusable against Tulane, and 2 just decisions that you can't make at this point. It's year 2, can't happen. Last week, still had some mental stuff that needs to be cleaned up, but ultimately, and you've seen me say this, Derek, like, we're talking about especially 4 of the top 5, 6 NFL quarterbacks this year are 21. They're juniors, first-year draft-eligible guys. There's going to be a lot of volatility with them. They lost 7 months of development last year, and whenever you talk to people within the industry, for quarterbacks, especially that an hour on the fast track, everybody's at the, sit 1 year, play 2, go off to the NFL. That development time is crucial. Every minute and every day that they can get is very important. So he's gonna have there's gonna be a game. There's gonna be another game at this year at some point where Spencer's gonna be, you're gonna have that WTF moment where, like, is he growing up? Is he maturing? Is he doing those things? And it should be expected. I think a lot of people comp him to what Mahomes was doing at Texas Tech, where he struggled stepping up in the pocket, struggled with pocket presence, struggled with some decision-making. He had 3 bad games, Mahomes did, at junior year before he went off to the NFL. So it's not to be unexpected. He's the most talented quarterback in the country upstairs. I don't know if he's the best quarterback in the country upstairs. But at the end of the day, his talent's overwhelming. And if he gets going and he gets confident, his eyes are in the right place, he's trusting the offense. I think, a lot of people point to that Texas Tech game a year ago, what he can be. And when he looks like that, like he did against TCU and Texas Tech, it's hard to find another quarterback in the country that's better.
You talk about the upstairs piece. Is that just him needing to mature a little bit more because he is still a younger-ish quarterback? Him just needing to mature a little bit more and realize that he can't just rely on the arm talent. He's not going to be able to beat people just on his arm.
Yeah, and I think if anything, like just picking up indicators, like quickly, like not like I appreciate the fact that he's so coachable that he'll do whatever he's coached to do. But when Baker, and you covered Oklahoma, I believe maybe you left right after him or whatever. But when Baker got good was when Baker wasn't needing to look at the sideline to figure out what was happening on the field. Baker was controlling the offense. He was managing the offense. Kyler Murray until 9, 10, 11 games in the season to take his hands off. Jalen Hurts never had that, but like very much at all. Rattler didn't check much at all last year on his own. So it also goes hand in hand with how much confidence Lincoln has that they can run his offense to the best of its ability. We saw a little bit last week, and even in the first week where Spencer kind of took some of that on his own and grew up and matured and can see things and adjust on the fly. And it's just, hey, it's stacking those weeks on each other. He's going to get a tougher opponent this week. Oklahoma's offensive line has still not really shown that they can be the group that they need to be. Nebraska, obviously, their strength is in that front 7. So it's going to be a great test for Spencer. It's going to be a great barometer, see how much he's grown up, how he can deal with a left tackle getting beat sometimes, a right tackle getting beat sometimes, and staying in the pocket and making decisions on his own. I think it has a little bit to do with maturing and growing up, but it's also, too, it goes hand in hand with Lincoln, making sure that if he's going to have control of the offense, Lincoln is, and not take his hands off, that, he needs to put Spencer in the best position to be successful in every play. And really, they've kind of been really vanilla the first 2 weeks and not, as the year goes on, Derek, you covered Oklahoma, Lincoln gets more creative as the year goes on. And so we'll see we saw split back. You saw me tweet this. We saw split back with a handoff for a running back for the first time this year, once on Saturday. I would anticipate you guys that Nebraska is going to see a lot of new stuff on Saturday and stuff that I haven't seen quite yet either.
So we'll get to Lincoln in a second because I want to talk about the thing with his play calling because it's been a recurring thing that people bring up. It's just I don't know if it's a boogeyman or not. But one more thing on Spencer. This is going to be. Now we'll find out this weekend how actually good Nebraska's defense is, if it is actually good. But is it safe to say that this will be the best defense Spencer has faced this season so far? What do you think we'll see from him?
This season, and I would say that it'll be the Iowa State last year, Baylor last year. That Baylor defense may be the best defense in the Big 12 when it's all said and done. Iowa State last year, Baylor last year, TCU's defense was good. They weren't great. I mean, this is probably the third, fourth, fifth in terms of on paper heading into a game. I mean, this is probably fourth, fifth, sixth best defense he's faced since he's been at Oklahoma. So yeah, it'll be a really good test for them, and that goes hand in hand with the offensive line, which I know you'll want to get to as well.
Yeah, and Nebraska, it'll be curious to see how Nebraska tries to take advantage of that, because Nebraska is still searching for that kind of premier pass rusher. They just don't have that guy. They haven't had that guy. Lincoln, I mean, they're up 37-14 at halftime, 40-22 entering the fourth. This is a thing that has happened. They have squandered leads. What is it actually a thing, Keegan? Do you actually think that this is a thing with Lincoln, or is it just circumstantial? Like, are you worried about him having a lead late and then getting conservative? Because if Vegas is right on this one, Oklahoma should have a lead, a big lead going into the fourth.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, we're talking about the best offensive mind in football, college, NFL, regardless. I think you can point to the 2019 season. You're seeing a lot of that on Twitter right now of Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles in week one. It was almost a carbon copy of what they ran the last back half of 2019. And that's for a reason. And because Lincoln's special at what he does, making adjustments and knowing what fits his quarterback's strengths. I do think there is part of it of I want to hold stuff back. I don't want to show everything every single week. I think the game, a lot of people, if you want to point to something that points to that 2017, that first TCU game before they have to play TCU again, about 3 or 4 weeks, Rodney Anderson has a monster first half. They're up 24-30. And they didn't run any. They just ran it right at TCU for the second half. Like, they didn't try anything. They didn't try to be creative. So I think part of it is that he wants to see his offense be able to run the base and run the basics of the offense. And at the same time, the worst thing that probably could have happened to him as a play caller, Derek, is that he now has a defense that he can trust and rely on, and a kicker that he can trust and rely on. And Oklahoma people don't want to hear that, but that's okay. Sometimes it's okay if your quarterback's not figuring things out in the Big 12 championship. It's okay on a 3rd and 9 to surrender that drive and punt it and put Iowa State back inside their 10. It's okay for that to happen. I promise you. And, I think that it takes an adjustment, because for the first 4 years, you saw Lincoln just an onslaught of week to week trying to pummel his opponents from a scheme perspective. And really, since Grinch has been hired, it hasn't been that way. So I think it goes all hand in hand together, Derek. I would say that I have full trust in Lincoln that he's going to, that the base, he's not going to – I know we'll talk about this. But I would anticipate, with everything that's happened with the Nebraska game, that I don't think that you're going to see Oklahoma take the foot off the gas this week.
Let's talk about that right now, because that's one thing I wanted to get to. Nebraska tried to back out of this game, and there was no denying that from Nebraska's side of things. Now, they gave you reasons that maybe weren't true reasons, but Nebraska tried to back out of this game in the springtime. And so we've had months and months and months of bits and pieces coming out here and there of what happened, why it happened. Bill Moose, Nebraska's former athletic director, told the newspapers that he advised Scott Frost against trying to do it. And then Brett McMurphy reported that Scott Frost was the main proponent trying to get out of the game. So there are a lot of different ways that you can interpret Nebraska trying to get out of this game. But the fact of the matter is, this was the 50th anniversary of the 1971 game of the century. This game means a whole lot to a whole lot of people. We just got done talking about it in the earlier part of this podcast. And from Oklahoma's perspective, Lincoln Riley could take that, and even if it wasn't factual, could tell his team, they're scared of you guys. They disrespected us. Let's hang 100 on them, or something like that, right? Do you think that Lincoln is going to try to run up the score on this team as sort of, we're going to get you back for what happened. I guess what's been the tone from Lincoln, from the offense during this week leading up to it?
Yeah, I want to say this. Like, the big thing is not Lincoln and the football team. Like, Joe Castiglione's not happy about it. And I'm sure when whoever the AD or Albert's now that's up there, when they meet on their Friday night meeting, they go over the event planning and all that fun stuff, that Joe will have some choice words. But
well, Bill wasn't happy about it either. So
allegedly, right? I think we have to put the quotes around that.
Oh, sure.
Who knows?
He wasn't.
So I would say this. I think to themselves, they need to go out and prove that they can go do that. I think you saw that after the Texas game last year, after they played bad in the first quarter, great football the next two, great the first half of the fourth, and somehow a 14-point lead with 6 minutes left evaporated, and that game went to overtime. They come up against TCU, they throw a knockout punch in the first quarter, and they kept punching and they kept punching. Texas Tech, same thing. This team has a lot it needs to prove to itself, that they're capable of doing that. So I think it wouldn't have a Nebraska factor to it. Now, will Joe C probably be like Lincoln? Don't let up. Like, keep Spencer in until the fourth quarter if you have to. Like, I'm not going to sit here. I don't think I think he's too much of a professional to say something along those lines. I don't know. I don't think anything this offseason really is going to be like bulletin board material. But this team has a lot to prove itself. I mean, you'll go back since 2017, Derek, or since Lincoln became the head coach, they've had 15 games that they've given up 2 or 3 touchdown leads and allowed teams to get back in. So they've got a lot to go prove themselves. I was about to say it's unacceptable. It is. But they got a lot they need to go prove themselves that they are the team they think they are, that this team is capable of winning a national championship, that they think they are. So I think for those reasons, you could see it, if it's a 3 touchdown game or 4 late in the third, like Spencer stays in a little bit longer than maybe he should. Granted that Caleb Williams needs as many reps as he can as the backup quarterback. So I would say that they've got a lot on them that they need to go out and prove this week. I don't know how much Nebraska and the offseason stuff is going to have to do with it, but I will I will put that there. And then I'll also say I wouldn't be surprised if Joe C said something, because we both know Joe Castiglione really well. He's a very good professional, but he's very petty.
Yeah. Yes, he is. Yep. That's for sure. Let's talk about the offensive line real quick, and then we'll switch to the defense. OU's 52nd nationally, I believe, in standard down success rate. You look at some of the offensive line centric analytics, they're bottom 30, bottom 40 in things like line yard stuff rate, power success rate, things like that. Now, small sample size, obviously they've only played 2 games, but you've referenced the offensive line a couple of times. Are you concerned about what you've seen from them? Do you think it's just a rough start, slow to get rolling? What do you think is going on with the offensive line?
I think the biggest thing is just continuity. Andrew Rain was out for 10 days of fall camp. As everybody saw, the report from RJ Young can confirm that he did test positive for COVID-19. So he was out 10 days, and Morris didn't come in to camp 100% physically ready. So 2 of your top guys, 2 likely NFL guys, are not available for you. You want those guys to be there. And when they're not, I think it causes some concern, has some concern there. And Bill B, though, he's going to roll with the punches with his veterans that know the offense, that know the play calls. He's going to roll with them until he can't. And so will you guys see Tyrese Robinson at right tackle? Likely. Will you see Robert Condrell at center? Likely. Are those two guys that by week 9 are starting? Probably not. So I think a lot of it has to do with just talent overall, getting the right pieces on the field, those guys being ready, and just continuity in general. I mean, Andrew Rain's working with the ones at center for 6 months. And next thing you know, 10 days leading up to the game, Robert Condrell's having to work at center, transfer from Arizona. That's going to cause some issues. So they've allowed too much pressure. They've not been able to run the football well, and at least it weren't against Tulane. Now, I will say, like, if people read my reports and do whatever, I specifically pointed out 77 from Tulane's a really good defensive tackle. So is 94. Like, those are NFL guys, like future NFL guys. So, like, it's no those guys provided some trouble, but I mean, it's time. Like Chris Murray at right guard. Like, whenever you see him, you're gonna be like, man, he is short and squatty, 6'1", but he's about as good as I've evaluated as an interior guy across the country. And it's time for him to dominate this week. It's time for Marquis Hayes, you're a fifth-year senior. It's time for you to dominate. Anton Harrison, you've had a full spring and a full summer now, left tackle. Time to go out and dominate. If those guys play up to their capabilities each week, every snap, they're pretty good. I think they got a chance to be pretty good offensive line. So get some continuity, get the right puzzle pieces in, and we'll see kind of what happens. But I'm not anticipating Nebraska will see Oklahoma's best offensive line this week.
Okay. Let's pivot to the defense. Oklahoma is currently 20th nationally in yards per play allowed. Now, again, small sample size. But there was a lot of consternation about the speed D in week one. A big piece of this matchup will be, can Nebraska keep pace with Oklahoma's offense? Because Oklahoma's offense is going to put up points regardless of how well Nebraska's defense plays. How do you think this matchup goes? Oklahoma's defense against Nebraska's offense?
Well, considering what I charted in the first week with all the pressures that they allowed, I think I had 12 of them, and Illinois was able to do that, rushing to only 3 or 4 on 7 or 8 of those. It was a problem. That's a problem, especially against everybody will point, they only had 2 sacks against Tulane. Well, Tulane was getting rid of the football in a second. Snap, one read, throwing it, quick throw. You can't get sacks. You can generate some pressure doing that, but you can't get sacks that way.
Adrian Martinez doesn't do that.
And when you're talking about a defense that through the first 2 weeks, from a pressure standpoint, is pressuring the quarterback better than they were a year ago at this point, I think there's not much cause for concern. I will say that the biggest thing, and it's going to be scheme-related stuff. We talked about it last night on our podcast. Week one, like Tulane was running it on passing downs and passing it on running downs. And Grinch is very adamant about scheme-related things. Like if it's a passing down, we're going to pass blitz, which means we're going to drop both of our safeties back into coverage off the snap, which takes them out of a run fit. The free hitter coming up to come up in the hole and go make a play takes them out of the play completely. There was a little bit of that last week. There was times on 3rd and 13 where guys were open, and 3rd and 8 guys were open, and the ball wasn't completed. So I do think that from a personnel perspective, they're fine. Like when you guys watch David Agwebu play linebacker number 2, it'll amaze you. 6'4", 250, and could run. It's unbelievable. They're fine in the secondary. Their defensive line, they've got 6-7 NFL guys along it. And, I think that if Grinch, and I've said this before, and I think this goes with a lot of coordinators and coaches in college, kind of falls in love with something so much that it's hard to get away from it. Like if Oklahoma just pinned its ears back and said, Perrion, go rush this guy, bull rush the A gap. Just do that for 30 snaps. Just go do that. Isaiah Thomas, just rush off the edge 30 times. Nick Benito, just rush off the edge. Don't stunt. If they would just wear back and play their base defense, I don't know if there's a defense in the country that's going to generate as much pressure and as much problem and havoc as Oklahoma would. So I think there's that kind of give and take, right? Where like you want to be yourself and play your game and do what you do, but also at the same time, is it hurting you at times more than it has in the past through these first 2 weeks? Kind of. So there's going to be some scheme-related stuff. And, I broke down the Nebraska offense against Iowa last year. Like, I thought Frost schemed things up really well. There's a ton of guys open in the secondary. Balls, I thought Martinez was actually relatively good in that game. Whenever you talk about like progressions and getting to the right place and doing those things, I thought he was pretty good. So I have confidence that Frost can see some stuff within Grinch and be able to counter that and have some success and have a couple of explosive plays, 4 or 5 explosive plays, put together maybe 2 to 3 drives that look really good, that he can counter kind of what Oklahoma is doing. So now if that doesn't happen, that means Grinch has adjusted already through 2 games. because the last time something like this conversation was happening, Kansas State rushed 260 on them in Manhattan and they lost. So there's a lot to unpack about this defense. They're as talented as anybody in the country. Nebraska, I don't know if they play Penn State this year or Wisconsin, two of the better defenses right now through 2 weeks. Oklahoma is going to look very similar, maybe even more athletic and more physical and more explosive than those defenses. I just don't know if they're better in the back end of the secondary. So it's a lot to unpack about this defense so far through 2 weeks, but they're back up to 14th in SP+. They fell to 30th after week 1. That does adjust for opponent and strength. And with how well they played a week ago, just across the board, like I said, there's 4 or 5 plays where Western Carolina kind of caught Grinch in a play call that maybe probably shouldn't have been in. Again, I'm not in those walls. I'm not in those offices. I'm not game planning. But there's going to be opportunity for Nebraska to find some explosive plays and do those things.
Yeah. They play Wisconsin. They do not play Penn State. They get Ohio State, Michigan, and I'm blanking on the third crossover game. They get Ohio State, Michigan this year. They do not get Penn State. Fortunately, they got the weakest team in the Eastern Conference or the Eastern Division. Man, Ohio State's coming to town. Everybody always says 3 keys. Keegan, give me 2 keys to the game Saturday.
For Oklahoma, or for want to go Oklahoma, or for Nebraska? Both.
Dealer's choice. Go with what you feel.
I think the biggest key for Oklahoma is offensively. I would say they just got to deal with pressure. I mean, it's time. This offensive line's too damn talented to keep playing like this. It just is. Like, I could talk to you in days, about Marquise Hayes has a draftable grade right now. Like, if you'd have gone off the NFL last year, he'd have been a 4th, 5th round pick. On to Anton Harrison. Bill Beadville talks about how he's one of the more athletic guys that he's ever coached at the position with Cody Ford. Time to show up. Chris Murray, you look like a future All-American first-round pick in 2019 at UCLA. Like, it's time for that to show up. And so I think the allow pressure offensively, because it all goes hand in hand. I mean, again, Spencer's a young quarterback. The moment he has felt pressure in games, it has been a lot more volatile, snap to snap. So that Oklahoma's defense, I think it's just be yourself. I mean, Perron Winfrey against Tulane didn't show up until the final 5 defensive snaps, and Alex Grinch called them out this week kind of because of it. So defensively, if 8's going and 8's playing and 8 wants to go every snap, it's hard to find a defensive tackle in the country that plays with that kind of motor, with that kind of power, that kind of length. So Oklahoma needs Perron Winfrey to show up in a big way on Saturday. That's number 8 tackle. Will be the largest man on the field, or at least will look like that. Very broad-shouldered. Dane Brugler had him in his top 50 draft guys heading into the season. So for Nebraska, again, I think it's not like you can't be overwhelmed by Oklahoma. Like if you can take those punches, like take Oklahoma, for example, like Alabama always delivers this haymaker in the first quarter just because they're so much more talented and they're so much more physical. And if you can withstand that and not get behind 28-0 in the first quarter, you have a chance to win those games. So Nebraska is going to get a monster first punch from Oklahoma on Saturday. They're going to be showing up ready to play. And if they can withstand that, be able to adjust in the game to what Grinch is doing defensively, I think Nebraska's got a chance to put some drives together. I really do. And it's just take advantage of Oklahoma's aggression defensively. I would say for their defense, keep Spencer in the pocket. When that guy gets out of the pocket, I've said this, there's maybe 5 quarterbacks on planet Earth that can do what he does. And he's extremely special. I enjoy the hell out of breaking him down. I get mad at times breaking him down. But he's incredibly talented, and that's going to be Nebraska's biggest key. Keep that kid in the pocket. You can keep him in the pocket, you're going to have a chance to win. And win, I mean that. He's mentally upstairs. Again, like I said, he's still growing, man. None of these kids are these 21-year-olds. Sam Howell, Matt Corral. Matt Corral looks fantastic right now, but I promise you, in 3 or 4 games, he's going to throw like 3 picks because he just blindly makes throws. And Keaton Slovis the same. So those quarterbacks are going to be volatile this year. Spencer's in that same group. It's just keep him in the pocket, make him beat you. And if you can, you're going to give yourself a pretty good chance to win.
I'm going to link to Keegan's Twitter account in the description on this post. You guys can find and follow him. I recommend doing so. But Keegan, I want to give you a second, plug your stuff. Where can people read your stuff? Where can people hear you?
Yes, I would say this. You can go to our Through the Keyhole Patreon. It's through patreon.com/through the keyhole. It's got great stuff, film reviews. Like this week, I'll be breaking down Nebraska today and have a film review of them up for tomorrow. Like we'll be breaking down some of the games across the country for Friday, and then a post game, Nebraska film review on Sunday. So you'll get the people Oklahoma will get a little scout for Nebraska, which ended up coming really true for the Tulane game. I to almost any game I could find in all 22 from last season right now. So it's been really, really beneficial. And then I think the biggest thing, if you guys are in the sports betting world and all that, although the Vegas is wrecking everybody, I am 500 on the year. So I feel pretty good about that. And that's with sharprank.com. You can download their app and you can find my picks and do all that fun stuff. Partner with them about a month ago. They're a great company. So you can find my picks each week for that. I was 55% against the spread last year, as good as the models are. Bowl season wrecked my ass, pardon my French, but got down to 53, but had a strong year last year when everybody didn't. We're off to a pretty strong start this year. We'll see how we can do, and that's sharprank.com.
Bowl season is volatile too. We won't hold you to that. Keegan, I'll let you get out of here. Thanks, man, for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care, man.
That'll do it for this week. Keep reading HailVarsity.com. Subscribe to this podcast, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
A Hurrdat Media Production.